Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. I finally got my rebuilt white smokers in from JK. So just doing a quick initial impressions. This is a video I've wanted to make for a while. A big thing with these Pacific Northwest boots that people talk about is how they're so much better than regular boots like Red Wings and Thorogoods and other stuff, because not only are they resolable, but they're also rebuildable, in that this whole bottom section is able to be removed and just the shaft and tongue kept in place, and then the boots rebuilt, right? So I just got a few points here of discussion, right, that we can go over, from the cost and how long it took all the way to then getting in on a close-up view of the boots and how well JK did at rebuilding them. So first off, what were these originally? Originally, these were a pair of 10-inch whites Smokejumpers. Soft toe, regular V100 sole. I'd picked them up off eBay specifically to get them rebuilt because, you know, when you go on YouTube and you look up reviews of these Pacific Northwest boots, there's tons of videos out there on people with brand new boots. There's even a few videos that people have posted with, 1, 2, and 3 year updates on their boots. But there's not really, or there's very few videos on the actual rebuild process, on the cost, on how long it took, and what kind of quality boot you had after. So I went on eBay searching for a pair of boots that I thought was going to be a good candidate for a rebuild, and I stumbled on these Smokejumpers for like $90, right? And so I was able to zoom in on the pictures, make sure the shafts were good. I was hoping to actually be able to wear them a little bit before I rebuilt them, but the insoles inside here were cracked, and the person who had the boots before had the wrong size boot. Their feet were way too big for the boots, and they had broken them in such a way that I wasn't going to be able to comfortably wear them. So I shopped around with all the different boot makers to see who I was going to get them rebuilt from. And I ended up just sticking with JK. And the reason I stuck with JK is at the time, Nix wasn't rebuilding other companies' boots. Now they are, right? It seems like there was a discrepancy on the website a few weeks or months ago. Shyler on Reddit messaged like, oh, it shouldn't be like that, and then it was corrected. But at the time, when I looked and I gave them a call to rebuild and I checked their website, they were telling me that they weren't rebuilding other companies' boots. So then I moved on to whites. And Frank's and JK, right? And I ended up not going with Frank's, not because they're not a good company, but because I actually ended up ordering a brand new pair of boots from Frank's. So I was like, okay, well, I want to get it from somewhere different, since I'm going to have the boots coming in from Frank's, and I can kind of compare the two brand new boots. Because I placed this order, and I ended up purchasing the new pair of Frank's right around the exact same time. And so then it came down to between JK's and whites. And it purely came down to cost, is that it was significantly cheaper for me to get the boots rebuilt in the configuration I wanted, which was basically black smooth lower, the White X sole, Technora stitching, right, the fire resistant stitching, and a lowered, more block-like heel. That's what I wanted, composite toe, for my boots. And whites was willing to do it. They wanted to put in a steel toe, however, but they were just more expensive at the end of the day than JK's was. And JK's went out of their way to accommodate me. Now, if you go on their website, you'll see that the options they have for rebuild is greatly reduced. So when I was initially looking to get these rebuilt, sorry for all the shaking, there was just as many options as everyone else, or just about. You can get toe caps, you can get, however many lifts in the heel you wanted, you can get a variety of outsoles, a variety of different work or bison leathers. However, JK's as a company has greatly reduced their options for customizations. They've gotten rid of resoles entirely, which is a whole nother topic we'll talk about. But when I ordered these, it was right like the week that they started to transition, in which one of the first things they did is they got rid of a lot of options. So although I could get my boots rebuilt, I couldn't get them with the White X sole. And this was a problem for me because my use case for these boots isn't just as public works with my other boots, like the OT. As I mentioned in another video, I'm trying to transition to firefighting and EMS. So right now I'm a volunteer. I'm about to finish my EMT course and have my EMT sword. I finished all my write-outs and everything. I've been training every week with fire. I've been on a few details as a volunteer for events and other stuff. And so I needed a black pair of boots. And at our department, where I volunteer, they require that your station boots be fully black. They can't be black with a white sole or nothing like that. It has to be fully black with a safety toe for your station boots. And I didn't want a V100, a regular hard V100 sole like was on here before. I believe it was in the Iron Rangers videos I did. I showed how hard that sole was, and I knew from other boots I've had with the regular V100 sole or Red X sole that it was going to be too hard for all day on concrete, and I needed something with some good squish to it, in this case the White X sole. So I know a lot of people have had struggles with JK's customer service, but they've done nothing but go above and beyond to make me happy with all 3 pairs of boots I've had from them. I already told the story of my OTs, and in this case, instead of just telling me no, the gentleman on the phone looked for a way to basically get me the boot I needed. And so basically what they did is they rebuilt these as their Arctic, which is their insulated boot, but since these didn't originally have the insulation in them, they can't put it in during a rebuild. So they just made a note, do not put insulation in the boot, right? And then gave me the whole configuration I wanted, and I got them. If I recall correctly, the cost for my rebuild, so from Whites, they wanted $450 plus shipping, plus tax. Out the door, shipped and everything, I paid, I think, $400, if I recall correctly, from JK. And then it took almost exactly 8 weeks on the dot from the time I mailed them in to the time that I received the boots. So that's what you're looking at in terms of cost and lead time. Now, how does that compare to buying a brand new pair of boots? Many people talk about like, oh, it's not even worth it. It's so expensive to rebuild a pair of boots that you might as well buy new ones. Well, if I was to put this same configuration in across the board with the websites, which is White X sole, all smooth upper, high arch last with a lowered block heel, my cost for a pair in this configuration from NYX, if I recall correctly, would run, because I'd have to do their custom lace up, because that's the only one where you can get the high arch last with the lowered heel. Not only would it take 6 to 9 months for me to get the boots, but on top of that, the base cost is $660. Then you got to add in another $50 for the safety toe. And all the other modifications would be, and then another $15 for the Technora fire stitching, right? So in total, you're looking at about, I think it was $720 if I wanted a brand new pair in this configuration. Whereas I was able to get this whole configuration out the door, including my eBay price, for about just under $500. So I was able to save $250. That's not an insignificant amount of money. That's a resole, right? That's a quarter of a price of a pair of these boots. So it came with some pretty decent cost savings. If I was to get a similar configuration from Frank's, Frank's hates to lower a heel. They do not like putting lowered heels on their high arch boots. People have been straight up told no by Frank's. I mean, when I called and talked about it, the girl I spoke to on the phone, not Michelle, but the younger girl, was like, no, we won't do that. And then I had to talk with somebody else who told me that they would, right, when it came to the pair that I'm having built. So they really don't like to do that. Whites will do it, no problem. JKs will do it. NYX will do it, but Frank's, even Wesco will do it, but Frank's doesn't like doing the lowered heel. And then also, I believe they also charge around $40-50 for their safety toe. So their brace price for a pair of Highlanders, which would be a similar build to this, with a composite toe, is $5.90 plus another like 40-50 bucks for the safety toe, and then there's no extra charge for the lower heel or wide X sole. There is an extra charge for the Technora stitching as well. So again, same thing with Nicks. Cheaper than Nicks, you'd only be looking at around $650, $660, but that's still significantly more. It's still like 150 bucks, 160 bucks more. And that, and again, with Nicks and with Frank's, that's not including the price of shipping. So you do save a good bit of money by going the eBay route, by buying a used pair and then having them rebuilt. I would just admonish you to be careful. Not every pair you see on eBay for cheap is able to be rebuilt. But the main thing you're going to want to look for is that the upper, even if there's some damage, that specifically in this area, right here, I'll get up nice and close, specifically in this area, you want to see that it's not dried out and cracked, and that there's not a lot of holes indicating that it's been rebuilt before. Either of those things would make these not a good candidate for a rebuild, right? So you want to make sure that this upper shaft is in good shape, right? And in this case, they were good enough for the rebuild. So that's the cost and the time. Now let's get into a little bit more about the boots. I've been wearing the boots for a week, and I was really surprised. This has been the quickest break-in for any pair of Pacific Northwest boots that I've had, period. In fact, I went in and I picked these up on my lunch break, and I threw them on my feet because they tried to drop it off, UPS tried to drop it off at my place and nobody was home, and they needed to be signed, so it went back over to the post office, and I drove over there on my lunch break. I picked them up, I threw them on my feet, and I was able to wear them the whole day. And I was able to wear them the whole second day, and I only had minor discomfort right around here, and that wasn't a pair of white spite with the folding of the tongue, but rather I just crank my boots really tight when I'm breaking them in, and I had them cranked so tight that I was just, kind of putting some undue pressure on the top of my insteps. And all I did was loosen them up a little bit, and I wore them every day this week. I wore them for about 15, 16 hours straight on Saturday, just several days ago. I wore them all day at work the day before, right? Or 2 days before. So I have a busy schedule right now. I'm working full time. I'm taking an EMT course, and I'm training at an in-house fire academy to get my fire certs. So on Thursday, I worked all fucking day, and I actually was digging out a trench, and I was, in like ankle deep of mud, clearing out this mud and gravel and stagnant water all morning in these boots, and my feet stayed dry. We were working with the Vactor that day. We got 2 new guys for our Vactor, and so we were training them, and so finding like dirty filled up inlets and getting them there and showing them how it's done, right? And these boots held up great. And then after I worked all day doing that, I then went over for several hours to go train with fire. Our training days are Thursday nights. I trained Thursday night. And then I had my clinical for my EMT course the next day, 12 hours over at the hospital, wore them all day. They were great. Then Saturday, I had my class. That's an all-day class. So I was there from like 8 to 6. And then afterwards, the city was having their Veterans Day parade. And so I volunteered to help out on one of the brush units. So there was going to be a fireworks detail, and we went out there with the brush trucks, fire department did. And we were just there on standby around where the launch site was in case any of the embers caught any of the grass from the nearby fields or trees or trailer park on fire. Just monitoring that and making sure everything was safe. And I didn't get done with that till like 10:30 at night. And so I wore these boots way longer than I would have ever dared to wear any of my other pairs, brand spanking new, and had zero discomfort. And I think a big part of that is twofold. One, the uppers are already fully broken in. So that the shaft is like the main area you're breaking in. You're creasing this area for your ankle, and you're creasing this instep area and the tongue fold. The toughest thing to break in was probably the brand new kiltie. I ordered these with full length tall kilties, as you can see here. I ordered some big boys with this one, and they were great. I was surprised. I thought that the full midsole, because you can see how much beefier this full midsole is versus the construction on the OT. I thought that it was going to be tough to bend, but no, I was able to kneel straight away. It's only been a week. I can already feel my foot leaving its impression in the leather footbed, the 9-iron insole that JK and all the Pacific Northwest guys use. And it's already starting to take a shape. It's not as deep. It's probably only like a third or a quarter as deep as it is in my good old OTs or forefronts. But it's getting there. It's getting there. As for the leather, JK, Nicks, Whites, they all have the same work leather, which is Seidel oil tan leather. But they all have different philosophies as to what kind of tempering they choose. Now, Frank's kind of decides that they want the most durable, heavy-duty leather that they can get their hands on. So when it comes to choosing their Seidel leathers, Frank's wants the toughest hides. He wants them with the strongest, tightest tempers for durability. He doesn't want any loose grain in them. He wants longevity, right? And then JK's is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. You always hear John talking in their videos about the soft, buttery leather. He tries to get the softest hides he can to prioritize break-in. You know what I mean? And comfort, and immediate comfort. That's why they try to claim that there's no break-in. There is. But it's significantly less than most. And you can see that in these two boots. Whites and Nicks, however, they're kind of in the middle, right? Not as tough a temper as perhaps Frank's is choosing, but significantly more tight of a temper than JK's. And both of these uppers, both of these shafts are the same thickness, and they're both the same tan leather, just different color, black versus this redwood. However, even though they're both 100% broken in, the shaft on these whites is just, it's broken in, but it's just a stiffer temper, a stiffer feel to the leather. And there's no loose grain on this pair of OTs. This OTs has perfect leather. But just the temper of the hide is very soft and buttery compared to the hide on these whites. Like I said, the same thickness, it's just a difference in choice. So that's one thing to look out for when you're seeing which brand you want to go with. If you want a stiff, tough boot, I mean, Frank's does it that way. JK's chooses softer hides. The downside is that the softer temper hides, you'll see things like loose grain and grain break a lot more often than you'll see it in a stiffer tempered hide. And that's just because if the grain isn't super tight and stiff, if you're picking a looser, softer grain, you're probably going to have more grain break. And you see that with some JK boots. I had it with my first pair of OTs. And if you just look at posts of people posting their boots online, it's not that it doesn't exist with the other companies, but simply it's a lot more common with companies who are choosing either softer or lower grade hides, either or. So for example, Drew's, they use some Mexican hides. Super common to see loose grain in those boots. Or if they do, on some of them, use Seidel leather, it's super common to see loose grain on those hides. On the Frank's Patriots, they use a lower grade, it's still a high quality hide, but you'll see, unlike on the rest of Frank's models, you'll see on the Patriots, you'll see some loose grain at times. And then JK, they prioritize that soft, comfortable break-in, and sometimes those soft hides can hide that grain break until you start to break the boots in. That's something that I had with my first pair of OTs, where I got them out of the box and it just looked a little odd, almost like it was like a vein. And then I started wearing them and like the whole thing wrinkled up and you could feel like that spongy feeling. So, it can be a luck of the draw. There's some ups and downs to a softer temper hide, but when it's a good quality hide, when you get a good boot like this, and it's that soft temper, man, it's really comfortable. And wearing these whites really helped me appreciate that about my OTs. Now, enough about the hides. Back to these rebuilds. So the break-in, like I mentioned, was minimal. Of course, this stiff heel counter still needs to get broken in. However, it's a lot tighter of a fit and better of a fit than all of my previous pairs. So all 4 of my Pacific Northwest boots have been the exact same size, and they've all been from JK up until now, until I get the Franks. These whites, like I said, I had them rebuilt by JK, so they're basically a JK boot now. My 2 pairs of OTs, and then my 1 pair of 4 fronts that I'm going to be sending out for a rebuild pretty soon here. They've all been the exact same size. However, whoever did the lasting on this pair of rebuilds has done the best job of any of the pairs I've had so far. I haven't had a pair fit this good out of the box. The heel, it's not tight, it's not loose like it is a little bit in these OTs. It just fits my heel perfect. The ball of my foot is snug. It doesn't slide forward at all, but it's not too tight that I can't wear thick socks in it. So it's kind of funny to me that I have my pair of OTs, my pair of 4 fronts that I got brand new, and yet the rebuilds are the ones that fit the best. But that's just, you know, how the cookie crumbled when you deal with handmade, hand-lasted boots. Even when you're ordering the same size, there can be small variations. They all fit in my foot. If you look at the imprint, it looks the same in all 3, but just how it feels on the foot, how it laces up, is just ever so, you know, there's small minuscule differences between the 3 pairs. So now let's get in on a close-up of the boots. It's very interesting. So JK's gone under a lot of changes recently. One of the first changes is how you can see on here, it's very smooth, a smooth sanding job. They have gone away from the smooth finishing on their edges and switched to a rougher finishing. I don't know if you've ever seen a pair of like Red Wing nail seats, the Pecos, where it's like a really rough grit sandpaper they sand the edges with. Now that's what the kind of edging that JK is doing. And that's, I'm assuming, to save money and cut costs. They were trying to say it's more durable. I personally feel it's worse, because if you have a greater surface area, there's more nooks and crannies for dirt and mud to get stuck in. And that's what I found with these. I had to clean off these after I worked in all that mud on Thursday. And it was a lot more work to clean the mud off of the edges on these than it was, or than it is, whenever I do it on my OTs. And I think that's because whereas this is a smooth surface where I'm able to easily clean it off, that rough sanding, that rougher grit sandpaper that they use in finishing, and you'll see it when I do a close-up right now, there's a greater surface area, there's more nooks and crannies for that dirt to get in. So that's one thing to look out for. Like I mentioned, the other thing they did is they completely cut tons of options for their rebuilds. And they also cut tons of options for their custom boots and their main boot line. So they no longer make Packers, and they no longer make lace-to-toe boots. They no longer do toe caps. You can no longer get white X soles on anything but their Arctic boots. You can no longer... They're no longer offering resoles, which I really don't like. But I understand why they're doing all these changes, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. But one of the biggest things they've done is they've changed their construction. So most Pacific Northwest boots are built like this OT, where it's a 270 degree stitch down, and then the back end is nailed. It's nailed. It's built like a nail bottom boot, like Buck and Billy Ray's doing all those videos about nail bottom boots right now. Well, the P&W boots are nail constructed, but just in the back half. And then in the front half, it flares out and stitches down. And now what JK is doing is that they're having 100% of their models be switched over to a 360 degree stitch down, like you see with Nick's Ridgeline and Hardware Pro models, or their Weather Shield models as well, their tactical models, and like JK already was doing with their 300 series. The first boot they claimed was coming out with it was the Forefront, and they made an announcement about that and everything. However, they made that announcement after people have already started receiving boots that weren't the Forefronts in the 360 degree stitch down construction. These included, and they didn't tell me that they were going to build these boots in any other way than the traditional 270-degree stitch down construction. Like I mentioned, the quality of these rebuilds is superb. And as you'll see when we go close in, the stitching, the lasting, the bottoming is superb. They did a great job on these boots. However, all these changes that I've mentioned, they did all of them, excluding the resoles, without announcing it to the customers. And I mean this from a fan of JK boots, so take this not as like criticism, but feedback from your fans, right? From your customers, that your loyal customers, that we'd appreciate being kept in the loop. It can be frustrating if you're ordering a boot expecting a smooth, top-notch finish, and you get one with a rugged finish, right? Now there's benefits to rugged boots. Some people don't give a fuck about it, right? It could be frustrating if you were desiring to build a certain custom configuration, which I was, and I wasn't able to get that done. So when I ordered my boots from Frank's, part of the reason I ordered them from Frank's is because the configuration I ordered from Frank's, I was gonna order from JK. And when I called to place that order, they told me they were no longer offering those options anymore, right? And then they come out and they say that they're no longer going to be doing resoles as well. Instead of resoles at $220 and then rebuilds at $300 or $350, JK said that from now on they're only going to offer rebuilds, and they're only going to rebuild JK branded boots from now on. But those rebuilds are going to come at the $220 resole price, right? And it's going to be in the new 360 stitch down construction. So on one hand, it's great that now JK has the cheapest rebuild on the market. But on the other hand, it is kind of frustrating that now we got to send our boots to other boot companies or some of the few mail order cobblers that can handle stitch down boots. Because a vast majority of local cobblers don't have the equipment to fully stitch these big, thick soles and midsoles all the way through. And if that's something you want or something you need, it can't be done by most people locally. I have a good local cobbler. However, he's really only able to handle wedge soles and traditional Goodyear welt construction, specifically cowboy boots, because I'm in deep South Texas on the Mexican border. So 90% of what this guy does is wedge sole work boots like Thorogoods and Red Wings, and cowboy boots, right? With the occasional dress shoe thrown in. He's never seen a stitch down boot, much let alone one with this thick of a construction. And he doesn't have the machine to stitch it through. Not to mention that you really don't want to experiment and fuck around and find out with your local cobbler when these boots are as expensive as they are. These boots ended up costing me on the low end of $500. If you got them brand new, they could have costed you, $650 to $750. And you don't want to give that to a local cobbler who may ruin them. Because the thing is it's not like a Goodyear welt where if they mess it up, they could just put on a new welt. If they mess up this flared out stitching, this is part of the vamp. Now your only choice is to do a rebuild. I feel much more comfortable sending it to the people that made the boots, to the people that rebuilt the boots, to sending it to JK directly. So it is sad to see. And it is kind of frustrating for all these changes to come in without any announcement, and they just be slid in, and then people be sent boots that aren't what they were expecting. I think that's where a lot of the negative feedback is coming from. I really feel if JK was just kind of more open and honest, and they didn't try to spin everything in a positive light. When they came out with the rougher sanding, they were trying to say it was more durable. When they came out with the rebuilds and no resoles, they were trying to say it makes the boots last longer. Now, if you're a kind of guy that after 1 year, not only is this heavy leather, not only is the sole worn out, but somehow you made this heavy leather destroyed and it wouldn't last another year with a resole, it's better for you because now you can get your boots rebuilt every year for cheaper. But for people who don't blow through the vamp of their boot within 1 year, but do wear out a sole within a year or two, like myself and 90% of the other customers, it does shorten the life of the boot if we stick with JK, because now instead of getting, let's say 3 rebuilds or 4 rebuilds with a resole in between or 2 resoles in between, so let's say you get 1 resole and then 1 rebuild, right? And you get a maximum of, let's say, 4 rebuilds out of your boots. That's going to give you 8 years of boot. If you have just that one pair and you're blowing through them, right? However, with the new way, you only get 4 years of boot before this upper has been stitched through so many times that it's no longer able to be used. And they didn't say that hey, we're trying to increase our production, lower our lead times, and keep prices low. So we're no longer going to offer rebuilds, which is, would be like an honest way of saying it. They said that they're extending the life of the boot. And to be honest, I fail to see how that's the case. I really wish, like I said, that they were honest. For me as a customer and as somebody who's recommended boots, JK's Boots, who makes tons of posts about them on the Stitch Down, on the Discord, on Reddit, makes all these YouTubes about JK Boots. I would have appreciated if just like 6 months ago they just said like, hey, look, business is expanding and we have a crossroads. Now, when your business expands, either you can hire and train more people, which increases your overhead and increase prices, or we can outsource it and these wouldn't be American-made boots anymore, which nobody would want, to keep the lead times down and the prices cheap, or we start cutting and streamlining our production so that way we can keep our prices affordable and keep our lead times down. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to build a rugged work boot. We're going to sacrifice a few cosmetic issues. We're going to cut out a few options that a very small percentage of orders actually make up, like the toe caps and lace to toes, but that take a significant amount of time in the production line. And we found that we think that 360-degree stitch down is the future, and so we're switching to that construction method, and that this is going to be the timeline. If they had come out with a post like that like 6 months ago when all these changes began, I think that the community would have took it in stride. Instead, what we're seeing is lots of people who have made posts and videos about JKs and how much they like them basically start to turn on the brand and stop recommending them. Now, I'm not going to stop recommending JK boots because I think they still build an excellent work boot. Fantastic. But I do think they kind of fumbled all of these changes, and that's coming just, like I said, from a fan, from a feedback perspective. I still think that even with the 360 construction, that the OT is the best jack of all trades, do it all work boot on the market. I still think it's better than the NYX Hardware Pro, which uses a rubber insole. If they're both 360 construction, I mean, at least I'm getting a leather midsole and leather insole with the JKs, unlike the NYX. And also the lead times is a quarter to a third of that of NYX, right? And the price is, for the most part, cheaper than NYX, and they do significantly more sales than NYX, So I still really like the OTs and the forefronts as boots. I still really like JK's Boots as a company, but man, like even for me, after this pair, I really don't see myself buying another pair, and that's not because there aren't good work boots on the that they're making, but it just seems like as a company, they're trying to shift to basically a work boot and wildland firefighter boot company, where it's like we're not doing any heritage, any boots for style outside of some of the Bisons, right? We're just doing work and fire boots, and we're going to streamline our production to be able to build them quickly, to a rugged standard, and to keep our price as low as we can, right? And there is merit in that, and that's why I really like JK Boots. Is that it feels like with NYX and Whites, they've kind of forsaken their blue collar and wildland firefighter original base in favor of the heritage market, and they're kind of going the way of Viberg. JK's always stayed loyal to the logger, construction, wildland firefighter customer base, and for that reason, since that's what I am, they've always been my favorite brand. However, the downside to that is you hardly need more than 2 or 3 pairs of work boots. I mean, like everyone says, you want 2 pairs of work boots. That way you could rotate them. And for me, with a pair of low-heeled, basically Super Duties now, and these OTs, I feel like I got the perfect combination of 2 work boots to alternate between. So I don't really need another pair of JKs. And since they don't really make a casual boot, if I want a casual boot or a boot for my time off, I really I'm gonna go to one of the other companies, which is why I went to Frank's. I mean, even if you and I live in an area where there's no winter, like it's desert heat year round here. Today's the coldest day of the year so far. It was 47 in the morning, but it was in the 80s or high 70s by this afternoon, and in like 2 or 3 days, it's gonna be back to the 90s here in the tip of South Texas. So, I mean, but even if you lived up north and you had 2 pairs of boots to rotate in the summer and 2 pairs of their Arctics to rotate in the winter, that still would only put you at 4 pairs. Which you see guys getting tons of pairs, right? So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I see the road that JK's going down. I think that they kind of fumbled this transition, but I still would recommend them, but with a big asterisk. A big asterisk, and that says that if you need a pair of durable, rugged, heavy-duty work boots, right, that are very much a function over form, then JK's is your brand. A model like the Super Duties or the OTs are going to be a fantastic pair of work boots. They're going to be built still. One thing that they didn't do, you'll notice, is they still didn't compromise on the Technora fire thread stitching, which is one of the big reasons I loved JK. Because like I said, part of my hobbies is blacksmithing. Before I painted cars or did anything, I went to school to weld, right? And in automotive shops, you're always welding and using cutting torches. And in many trades, you're using grinders and cutting torches and plasma cutters. Not just welders, right? And so all of their boots having that fire thread, that Technora Kevlar stitching, and still being the price that they are, still being significantly cheaper than the models from Nick's and Frank's and White's that have that stitching, is big to me, right? And they didn't cut that out. So like I said, if you need a pair of rugged work boots, go with JK's. Now, the downside is they're not going to be as finely finished as the other Pacific Northwest brands, as Wesco's, White's, Nick's, or Frank's. And you may have some issues with loose grain. You may have to exchange a pair. They're not going to be able to be resold by JK. You're going to have to find either a local cobbler that is experienced with stitch down, or you're going to have to send them to another brand like Nick's, Frank's, or White's to get them resold, or you're going to have to send them off to one of the high-end mail-in cobblers like EBR Leathercraft, or Wyatt and Dad, or it's Wyatt and Sons or something like that, or Bendo's Leatherworks, or who are the new guys, DeVito shoe repair. You're gonna have to send it, and those, they cost $250 for a resale from those guys, so plus shipping. So it does suck that you lose that service, but if you don't mind sending your boots in for a resale for one of those people, if that $220 rebuild price is good for you and what you do, if the rougher finishing on the newer boots is good with you, if the 360 stitch down is good with you, I know there's a lot of asterisks, but if all those things are good with you, and I think they would be for many people, then yeah, I still recommend a pair of JKs. But if you're paying $600 or $500+ for a pair of boots, and you want high-end finishing or higher-end finishing, maybe not high-end, but higher-end finishing, and you want to be able to send them back to that same company for resoles, then you're probably going to be better pleased ordering from White's, Nick's, or Frank's, or if you want a heavy duty boot like this for your off time, for more casual use, maybe not work use, maybe you still do a lot of hard work at home, right? You own a property and you do maintenance on your property and you want a pair of boots for that, or for camping or hiking or just going out, you're going to have to look elsewhere because JK doesn't make those kinds of boots. And especially with the 360 stitch down now, you're not going to have tight, nice heels. It's a wider construction. So that's all the caveats and the background. Like I said, the boots have been very comfortable. The rebuild, I was legitimately surprised with how good of a job that they did. And let's get a close-up look now of the boots. This is probably the longest video I've done so far on boots, but let's get this camera up. Oh boy. Alrighty, we got the camera turned around. Let me just adjust this here. So let's see it from far away. So let's get in on the nitty-gritty of this rebuild. So first, let's look at the edging. I could lean these up here. Get that focused. Now, do you see the rough sand scratches in this leather? You can kind of see the direction that the belt sander was going when they sanded and did the edging on these boots. I can get the camera to focus. And compare that to my OTs, which is how everyone else does it, and JK used to do it. See how nice and smooth that is? Even after all the work they've been through. But, that may be one negative for most. But now let's look at the positive. Look at the stitching that they did on this new heel cap. And then here, where the upper meets the vamp. It's perfect. The stitching all the way around. In fact, I looked around on both boots and there's only one single, what people would call like a mistake, and that's right here. If you can see those two extra long bits there, it seems like it jumped a little bit, right? And then here we can see a close-up of the new style construction. So instead of it ending about here and then the rest of the boot being a nail-down construction like was done previously and like is done at all the other Pacific Northwest companies, you see that? This 270 degree, they cut it, flare it out, and then the rest of this is nailed. On the new boots, it's flared and it's stitched down. So they're still nailing their midsoles on it. And if you look, so what they'll do is they'll nail down the leather shank, and then they'll do 2 rows of nails on these boots. And that first row holds the midsole in place and kind of cups it around the shank. And then the second row of nails in these style constructions basically hold down the upper. They curl it in and tuck it up into the insole, and then that's covered inside by the little like half slip sole. And let's get these back to focus. So you can see my used uppers on these whites. Full-length kilties. See, these were originally Smokejumpers. And then the new leather. And the leather they used for the vamp and heel counter is perfect. No defects in the leather. I haven't found a single defect. I've worn them all week and there's not a single hint of loose grain. And they did a really fantastic job on putting in these safety toes. It looks, I polished them with some Allen Edmonds black cream polish. So especially around the toes. So that's why the toe's looking a little bit pronounced. But they have the least phallic shape of any of my composite toe work boots or safety toe work boots so far, other than maybe my my Thorough Goods. You can see there. I've already done a little bit of damage. If I can get this to focus. Working. Here we go. We see here as well, there's that little jump. So it's on the outside on here, and then I think on the inside on the other pair where there's that little jump. But they did a really good job. The stitching is great, minus that little jump, which is very, very minor. The Widex sole is just as soft as the Honey. I mean, I've been reading and watching some videos, and there's some out there who claim that they don't notice the difference, and I really don't know how. I know that I think it was either, who was it? It was either Double Bass or Maxwell House Ranch who was saying that their Drews, that the heel was possibly like the V100 heel and not a White X heel, that there might not be a White X heel. But to be honest, I immediately, when he said that, I went in, and if you could see, let me just get this camera to focus here. Look at how flexible and soft that is. I really don't think that that's the case, because the heel, the compound on this heel is just as soft, from what I can tell, as the rest of the sole. So I think there is a heel cap for the White X Vibram soles. I just think maybe perhaps Drew's isn't putting them on. You know, maybe that's part of why Drew's are the price that they are. I have no idea. I don't own a pair of Drew's, so I can't officially comment on that. But what I can say is, for the heel cap on these White X rebuilds from JK, the compound of the heel cap is very soft, and walking around all day on hard surfaces, I found them to be very comfortable, just as comfortable, if not more, than my honey soles on my OT, right? So that's that. The full-length kilties. One thing I was wanting to mention is, one thing I like that JK does that nobody else that I know of does, is on their kilties, if you'll notice, the middle area on the kiltie is significantly thicker than the end. And that's because what they do is they skive the edges of the kilties down. And I find, because I tried a few different kilties, that really leads to a more comfortable fit, right? And so if you're looking for a pair of kilties, maybe you don't like, you could hate JK boots, but if you need a pair of kilties, I'd highly recommend some kilties from JK. The JK kilties, I have like 5 pairs of kilties from JK, and the leather on all of them is actually rather stiff, even stiffer than what I get on a lot of their boots. And I haven't had a single issue of loose grain on any of them. And the way they skive the edges down make them very comfortable. So highly recommend kilties from JK. These laces also came with the rebuilds, these nylon laces. And then one other thing I want to look at is, look at how good of a job they did balancing the heel. A lot of people have issues with the lowered moderate heel. This is only 2 leather heel lifts, right? Before they get to the top lift, that Vibram White X top lift. And they did a fantastic job on these. I mean, if I put this here, that way we can get a better look at it. Oh, this is my good notebook, but whatever. Normally you'll see either a significant amount of lift in the back when you do a moderate heel on a high arch last, like you see, like you see in the back of these OTs. Or what you'll also see, like I've seen this from Nick's at times, is that there's a big gap right here, and they say that your weight has to settle it down for it to level out. But these came perfectly flat from the factory when they were rebuilt on both boots. They did a great job, and they actually have a good bit of toe spring, so they kind of remind me a little bit of like the Weidberg 310, like the sprung toe, or like the Nick's Prospector sprung toe, like old-timey work boots. I really like it. I think they look really nice. I've gotten more compliments on these than I did from my OTs or from my forefronts. A lot of the guys at work think that they were pretty sick, as well as at my EMT course. And when I was out there training with fire, a lot of the guys commented on them. So that's the boots. That's the rebuilds. Like I mentioned, as you can see, the quality of rebuilt P&W boots is there. The price is a lot more affordable. It's a significant discount over buying a brand new pair. They break in really quickly and comfortably compared to a brand new pair. So there's lots of benefit to the rebuilds. I was skeptical, to be honest, because a lot of these YouTubers like Roseanneville and Carl Morawski, not that they don't make good videos, they make much better quality videos than what I make, but they don't work their boots like some of us do, and they get so many free boots that they don't ever really get them rebuilt. So it's one thing to have a guy who's not putting his money where his mouth is tell you that these boots can be rebuilt and they'll be good as new, but it's another thing. It's another thing to actually do it. Excuse me. And from everything that I could see, if this is the quality I can expect from Frank's, from White's, from JK, from Nick's for their rebuilds, I really say it is real what they say, that being able to rebuild these boots is a significant benefit, not only to be able to wear the boots for longer than you can most mass-produced boots, but also just in getting that bang for your buck when you purchase these high-end boots. You really can make these last 4 years. And so I'm going to be getting my forefronts rebuilt, not because that they can't be resold, but simply because the job I'm transitioning to with fire and EMS, they require black boots. And so I don't really need 2 pairs of brown work boots anymore. I'm going to leave my OTs, the rough out ones, as my work boots, and I'm going to get my forefronts rebuilt by Frank's now. So that way I can kind of have a nice pair of casual boots. So expect a video on that. By the end of the month, I should be getting my MTOs from Frank's in, so expect a video on that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video kind of talking about my experience with the rebuild process. Like I said, it was about 8 weeks total turnaround time from the time I mailed them to the time I received them. I'm very happy with the quality of the construction. They didn't tell me they were going to be the new 360 stitch down. They claim that it's more water resistant. Nick's makes the same claim. I found them to be pretty water resistant when I was digging in that mud, but time will tell. So just like with all my other boots, expect a 6-month update on these, as well as a 1 and 2 year update on these. This was just kind of the initial impressions to talk about some of the changes with JK's as a company, as well as what I thought, just my initial thoughts on the boots. And overall, I'm happy. Maybe I'm not happy with some of the changes that they're making as a company, but for this pair of boots, I think I really got my money's worth. So thank you, and hope you have a good one.